channel. Today I'm going to be doing a very spoilery rant review of You by Caroline Kepnes. This book is about Joe Goldberg. Joe is just an average guy. He runs a bookstore along with a part-time stoner kid named Curtis. One day, a very attractive woman walks into Joe's bookstore, and instantly Joe becomes very lustful. Joe does what any young horny man would do. He looks her up on the internet, and after some not-so-hard sleuthing, Joe finds Guinevere's address and thus begins the hardcore stalking. But Joe is smart, and he is patient, and he will do whatever it takes to ensure that he and Guinevere end up together. For the most part, I will be talking about the characters because by far the characters are the suckiest part of this whole fucking book. But there are a couple of other scenes that I'm just gonna throw in because they were dumb too. So first, we're gonna talk about Joe, serial killer and stalker Goldberg. See, I actually kind of like Joe and all his unrealistic bullshit. But when it comes to Beck, he wears these rose-tinted glasses, and it's like, this bitch can do no wrong. And you know what? At times, when he was thinking about Beck, I was completely unsure exactly who the psychotic one was. Was it Joe, or was it Beck, or was it both? Alright, so there were a couple of funny things in this book, which is why I rated it like 1.5 stars. And so I'm gonna tell you guys some of my funny Joe moments. Close to the beginning of the story, he falls out of a window because he is inside Beck's apartment and she walks in the door and he doesn't want to get caught. And I don't know, just like the later scenes that was him talking about how he like fell out of the window and what he's dealing with because he hurt his back. I don't know, I found that part really funny. Another one is he follows Beck to like this Charles Dickens festival reenactment thingy, I don't know. And at one point, like towards the end of the festival, he thinks that she saw him. And while he's driving back to the bookstore, he is like a slobbering crybaby mess. And like he's completely totally losing his shit because he thinks that Beck saw him. And it's like, it reminds me of like, I don't know, like in that moment I felt like, dude, are you 16? I don't know, I just found it really hilarious. That was funny. And then towards the middle-ish end, he's following Beck to Rhode Island. And already that night he had gotten beaten up, right? So like his face is pretty jacked. He you know, he's got some serious damage going on, right? But no, instead of, you know, taking care of his shit, he needs to go to Rhode Island because at any minute Beck is gonna be like, can you come to where I am, you know? So he needs to be there. And then, bam, he runs into a deer. He hits a deer, right? And he like swerves off the road and, you know, he's like obviously, you know, car accident, and he's really messed up. He's really, really messed up, guys, okay? But instead of, I don't know, like calling 911 because his phone's not damaged, he instantly, like, he checks to make sure where exactly he is and how close he is to Beck. And he gets out and he like crawl limps to her. And it was so stupid. It was funny, guys. And then one of the last ones is when, towards the very ending, Joe has locked Beck away into this fancy temperature-controlled cage thing in the downstairs of the bookstore. It's like where all the rare books are kept and all that. And they are both reading the Da Vinci Code, right? Because like she hasn't read it, he hasn't read it. It's like a bonding moment for them, right? And we get these passages of them like, you know, talking about certain scenes and things that happen, and they're both crying and all this other stuff. And then he gets up to go pee, and he realizes she never actually read the book. She was just faking. And I was like, got him. And it was just, and then there's some other things that happen, and like she like tricks him, and then she ends up kicking him in the nuts quite a few times, and I thought that was funny. Benji and his nasty booty hole tasting home fucking soda. I found him to be a very stereotypical rich white kid, honestly. He just so happens to be a kleptomaniac too. He is also very self-centered. He fits in very well with the other cast of characters in this book. Eventually, Joe drugs Benji and he locks him inside this, aforementioned cage. And then he proceeds to quiz Benji on books that Benji had read. What is it with Joe and quizzes? I don't understand. And he also makes Benji taste test his own product. The whole entire time he's in this cage, he is bitching and complaining about the food and the water and shit that Joe brings him. Instead of being, a good captive and trying to figure out a way out of this fucking cage, right? He's like, oh, I can't eat that. That's bad for my bowels. Or he's a really fucking prissy little bitch, honestly. I did not mourn Benji's death by peanut allergy. Next, I want to talk about Beck, who apparently everyone and their mother wants to fuck. She was written as a girl who loves to have sex and who also masturbates a lot. An unrealistically large amount of masturbation happens in this fucking book, and it's dumb. Now see, I don't have a problem with women having sex with however many people they want and masturbating when it's written in this way, okay? It's very, sexist. Am I allowed to say that since a female wrote this book? I don't know, but that's how I feel. So Joe is constantly thinking about how hot Beck is, right? And how she likes to, because he's stalking her, but how she likes to, walk around butt naked in front of these windows in her apartment where she doesn't even have curtains, because apparently she likes to have people look at her butt naked. And I'm pretty sure there are girls out there like that. So I don't think that's really unrealistic, but you'll see where I'm going with this. And every time she masturbates with her green fucking pillow, the pedestrians on the street and everyone inside of Macy's, she makes sure they fucking know. But for some reason, despite Beck absolutely loving to have sex and loving to masturbate, she refuses to have sex with Joe. And the sexual tension in this book was completely unnecessary. But when they finally do have sex, it was awful and it was anticlimactic and it lasted 2 seconds. Peach, or Peaches as I like to call her, is another rich bitch who likes to have her way, and she's very controlling. She is very self-centered and feels that everyone is out to get her in some way. Did I mention what a total fucking bitch she was? She was so rude to every single person, and I got so tired of her shit. I wanted to yank the stick that was shoved up her ass, and I wanted to ram it down her throat because I was done. I was so done with her from page 1. She was such a toxic person. I'm surprised the pages didn't melt with how freaking toxic this bitch was, right? And only three people in this entire book recognized it, and I don't understand why everybody else didn't. Alright, so Lynn and Channa, Beck's other two friends, these two characters are the smartest fucking bitches in this whole entire book. They were actually very normal women, and they gave Beck wonderful, fantastic, spot-on fucking advice that she did not follow, because then we wouldn't have a story. I don't have really anything negative to say about Lynn and Channa, other than every time they opened their mouths, they sounded like bitches. Are we starting to see a pattern yet with the females in this book? Blythe! Oh, sweet Blythe. She had like this much to do in the whole book. But yet, she was another snotty bitch that I could not stand. Ethan, employee number 2, because, like I mentioned before, Curtis the stoner kid got fired because he gave Beck Joe's address. Ethan is one of those manic happy people. He is always happy, and everything he says ends in like 6,000 exclamation marks. He was kind of normal, actually. Dr. Nikki, oh my goodness. Beck, and later Joe's therapist, who was a piece of work himself. Can you imagine what happens when you throw a hot therapist in with a story about a girl who loves to have sex? He also happens to be the worst unrealistic therapist that I've ever read about. Poor Karen Minty. Joe tries to be a normal guy, and immediately after meeting her, well, no, actually not immediately, like 1.5, 2 pages after meeting Karen, they're fucking in the train. So anyway, for a short amount of time, Joe and Karen Minty are dating, and he realizes that this must be what it's like to be normal. And then he realizes he absolutely hates it because he can't stand to be in another relationship with a woman who is not Beck. Karen Minty is also another character who is written as a needy, whiny bitch. Amy Adam. She is written into existence on page 357, and we do not see her again until page 421. Because, duh, we need a cliffhanger for an even shittier sequel. So I have a couple of questions for you guys who have read this shitty book. Why? Why is it being turned into a TV show? If you have seen this TV show, is it even better than the book? How is Beck able to buy food and pay other bills? Because yes, we know she bought, or she won this contest thing for this apartment, right? I'm assuming so. That means she's rent free. I don't remember anything about utilities being paid, but I'm just saying at some point she needs to eat. And she went on and on about how she really needed a job. Like, she said it like 8 times, and Joe was finally like, hey, do you want to work in the bookstore? And she was like, oh my god, yes! And it lasted for like 3 weeks, and then nothing was said anymore. Also, I firmly believe that Mr. Mooney pulled some psychological bullshit on Joe when he was younger. I don't think whatever might have happened in their past really, was a huge defining moment that definitely pushed Joe into being a serial killer and stalker and just fucking weirdo. But I think it certainly helped. Also, where are the fucking police in this book, and why aren't they doing their goddamn job? Also, I just want to point out that if a man had written this book, then people would be screaming at the top of their lungs about how sexist it is. Why is it okay for Kepnes to write her nipples popped 14 bajillion times and to write every single female character as an obnoxious bitch? I don't understand it. Overall, I really thought this was a crappy book, and I recommend that anyone who has not read it to don't waste their time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later.